Welcome back to Andertons TV.
Hi.
The wonderful Rabir Massad is joining us for the day, so please like and subscribe because I expect you'll catch 2 or 3 videos with Rabir in over the next few weeks. How have you been, Mr. Massad?
I've been all right. Been busy. We're all busy all the time, aren't we?
Well, you are especially. Vower's taken off, right?
It's going well. Yeah, finished the album. Well, finished writing it, so we're going to record it in the summer. And yeah, just lots of guitar-related shenanigans.
Some big gigs now?
Better gigs. Bigger. Getting there. Slowly but surely. Oh yeah, Download. Yeah, I played Download.
Anyway, look. One of the videos that we wanted to shoot for you guys, and there's no better person really than Rabir to come in and help us with this, is how to get the best out of your digital modeling device from kind of an EQ perspective. I think many guitar players will have grown up familiar with, they buy a guitar amplifier. Mm-hmm. And of course, that guitar amplifier has probably typically been voiced by the person designing it, knowing what speaker was going to be in the cab and the restraints of what that amplifier was going to basically sound like anyway, which is a very different process to when a designer, like the people that Neural employ or Boss or Fender or whoever employ, create their presets for you guys to use. Those designers might be wearing headphones, they might be using studio speakers like this, they might be using studio speakers like this, they might have a very different picking style to you, they might have a completely different guitar to you, and likewise when you're downloading patches that your favorite artists have played, again, those will have been created on all manner of different speakers. So it's really important that you understand how to find the appropriate tools within your modeling device to compensate for how what you're going to listen to it through might be different to what the person who designed the patch used it through. Equally, even if it's for the same person, so for someone like Rabir, in this video we're going to talk about how might you EQ your modeler to work with a pair of studio monitors. How might you EQ it differently to work with an FRFR cab, and we've got the Laney 112 down here, and how might you EQ it differently to use with a traditional cab into like a normal guitar amplifier, and so we're using the Victory power valve into a 1x12. Can we start then, B, with, we're using studio monitors first. We have a pair of Genelec 8040s, which are, what would you say that driver is? 8-inch driver?
It looks like an 8-inch
driver.
8-inch
driver with a high frequency horn, and it's a top end studio monitor, or relatively top end.
Yeah.
Show me first and foremost, what modules, what effects blocks would you use in the Quad Cortex? And if you don't own a Quad Cortex and you own an alternative, just find the equivalent of that. They'll all have one. I'm guessing you're not going to the amp to change bass, middle and treble. You're using something much more sophisticated than that to dial in the best sound.
Yeah, in this instance with this preset, these are captures that I'd made, which I'd already preset like the EQ of them already. So then after the fact, that's where I'd add something like an EQ block, which you can see it's fairly inactive right now. I've got very mild stuff going on here. But I find that to be, there's a couple of principles that I would take into consideration first is like, don't go over the top with EQ. Like the EQ can be really powerful. I would always put it after the amp blocks, or models or captures or whatever it is. Always put it afterwards because it's going to influence the sound after the fact rather than sending an EQ into an amp, because then digital modeling is meant to work in the same way. You'd never put an EQ pedal in front of the amp, would you? You put it in the effects loop.
Well, unless you wanted the EQ pedal to be more like some sort of supplementary drive sort of type thing.
Yeah. Or like a mild treble boost or something, but it's going to be way more effective in the effects loop, right? So in my head, I think about it after the amp is almost like the effects loop, right? In the same way you do your delay and your reverbs afterwards. And I would say in my case, when I was making these presets that are available, part of the reason I made them was for people to mess around with different amps and blends, was not to overly EQ them, because I feel like you said earlier, different speakers, everyone's going to be on different speakers. My monitors that I use to make these are going to be different to someone's, maybe a little Yamaha, whatever they're called, the little 5-inch ones, or these or whatever. So if you go overboard in your head at home it sounds cool, it's going to sound so different for everybody else's experience, and so that's why just be as subtle as possible. But there are a couple of things I would say. This is probably a better example. So this one is like a higher gain patch, and if you look at the EQ that I added, you can see
much more, pulling out much more of the higher frequencies here.
So what I'd call this is like notch EQ, notch filtering, if you want to call it that. And it's where there are a couple of nuisance frequencies that you can hear on one of the amps that's kind of annoying. That's going to be consistent wherever you hear it. So it doesn't matter what kind of speakers you got, you'll hear that because it's inherent in the sound of the
So if
model.
on that patch, if we switch the EQ off and give
Well, I'll
someone
show
an
you with it
example.
on and then off. So. You hear that kind of shh sound. If I turn this side off, so you're just hearing this amp.
It's interesting. It's still very subtle, isn't it? It's not like a big EQ change.
Exactly, but it's the kind of thing that over time gets on your nerves.
Right.
It's a subconscious thing, but by me taking those away, like if I show you what it's doing. 6 sound. So what?
It's that shushy sort of frequency response.
Yeah,
isn't it?
and they're like, I refer to them as like whistly frequencies that you hear, especially in higher gain tones. A lot of the time, there'll always be some whistly frequency in this area of the spectrum, which when you do this kind of notch, as I'd call it, so really, really thin, like a toothpick kind of vibe, you can move that around. And you'll hear where it's really prominent. It really jumps out. That's what you want to get rid of. That's what I would do.
So I think this is quite a good example of that. This is an EQ that you're using to dial out an unwanted frequency within an amp tone, as opposed to balance the sound depending on the sort of speakers that you're using.
I want the amp tone to be as untouched as possible, so that it's intended to sound the way it is.
Can we talk about, just let's take a step back in terms of, for people that perhaps aren't familiar, what are the different kinds of EQs that you might have in a modern sort of multi-effects unit?
Parametric is where it's like, I'm not very technical with that stuff, but I know that it's basically not individual sliders. Like if I go graphic, for example.
Graphic is what people will be familiar with, because they'll have got, like, especially if you're my age, you'll have had one on your car hi-fi at some point or other.
Yeah, graphic EQ is essentially, this is, looks.
So all the frequencies that are going to get
kind of
cut
predetermined.
or boosted, are set, aren't they? And I guess where this might be, if you're trying to find a frequency that's somewhere in between 1 kilohertz and 2 kilohertz, because that's the frequency that you either want to boost or cut. A graphic EQ might be annoying there because you can't get to that specific frequency, right?
Exactly. Whereas if I change this over to parametric EQ, so let's do like this.
And this is an 8
band. Yeah.
So you can effectively elect. In fact, it was a good demonstration. You were showing how you were moving one of those bands left and right.
So let's take band 3. And so you've got the amount of boost or cut, you've got the frequency and the Q factor. So if I show you what that is, if I was to boost this, you see how it's like a wide curve?
Yeah.
The Q factor will allow me to narrow it or widen it.
Yeah.
And that is, for me, because I like mixing music at home and all that kind of stuff, I find that way more, I can be really, really specific about the things I want to add or take away. For me personally, I much prefer that.
So we're going to stay in the domain of the parametric EQ for all intents and purposes here, rather than the graphic EQ.
Yeah, so let me put it after, let me just get rid of this for now. I'm going to move that. I'm going to add another EQ. This is going to affect everything.
Yeah.
So, what?
Oh, I see. So again, I think what Rabir's just done there, correct me if I'm wrong, is you're going to run that initial parametric EQ just to focus on dialing out an unwanted amp tone, and then you're going to use the other parametric EQ
Yeah.
And I guess this is where perhaps quad cortex may have an advantage over some cheaper devices where you can only run one EQ block. QC can run multiple EQ blocks. So the second parametric EQ, we're now going to focus very much on
the whole thing.
the whole thing to get the best that we can out of the speakers that we're using.
Yeah.
If you'd walked into someone's studio and they had a smaller pair of studio monitors, or a bigger pair, as in just what are your typical go-to, like what are you instantly trying to do? Let's stick with I think most home users will probably have a slightly smaller pair of studio monitors.
Yeah, you'll probably tend to find people will add more low end.
So that's what you would do, or you think that's probably what you wouldn't do?
If I'm just doing it for playing purposes, I would add it. If I'm recording, or making a preset for someone else in a different destination, I would not sort of commit that. If I'm just playing for myself, I'll do that.
What's quite cool about this, of course, is what you're hearing at this stage is the direct out from the quad cortex into whatever speaker. You might be listening to it on a phone.
Yeah.
So I think actually, regardless of what it does in the room here, let's just show people typically what happens if you start to boost. And what even is a bass frequency on a guitar? Because it's not like 100 hertz, is it? That's too.
No,
it's too low.
Yeah, it's going to give you. So I'll show you. So if I was, let's do 100 hertz, it's going to give you a little bit more rumble, like.
You said it's more of a rumble thing. You're absolutely right. It's actually not unpleasant, is it? It's quite a, it does. I don't think that's how you attempt to use that sound within a band mix, but just for playback, it's quite nice to have.
At home, for you, that's going to feel warmer and sort of more full.
And this was at 100 hertz,
yeah.
right? So actually, you're sort of saying, what's one aligned to 50 hertz? Can we even hear 50 hertz on a guitar?
If you've got no.
So down at 50 hertz, it's not doing anything really.
Yeah.
100 hertz, it's sort of, and so
there are different frequency hotspots for guitar that I like to think about, like 500 being the mid-range really, where it's going to be. It's not like, it's kind of the boxy mid-range. So
what was just before we moved to that, I thought what was interesting. So I'm going to put a fair amount of that bass in, but I'm going to move it. So you, depending on the speakers that you're listening to, when you go, oh yeah, what Rabeer's playing sounds good, then that's the kind of the bottom end that your speakers are going to react
that's a good
nicely
way of doing it, I
to.
suppose.
I actually kind of think on these, for that low end thing, around about 100 hertz probably is about right, isn't it? But if I had smaller speakers, you might want to push slightly more towards 200 hertz. Once we got above 200, it was a bit going into that sort of lower mid-range type sound. Then it was.
It gets more boxy the higher you go before then you start to hit the mid-range and then the honky stuff and then the shrill stuff. So
I love all this terminology. So let's talk about boxy. And I think many speakers have a tendency to sound boxy, right?
Yeah.
So actually what we might want to do here is the reverse, which is to find the boxy frequency. This is why I love parametric EQs, because what you can do is set up a loop if you can't play and adjust at the same time, and just boost or cut your frequency, and then just play with the positioning of that cue or that frequency, until you go, oh yeah, that sounds good. And that's the other thing as well. Like the science here is just, does it sound good to you or not?
Yeah, that's all that we're trying to achieve at the end of the day. So initially this starts at 500. So I'd say boxy, we're talking sort of 250 to the 350 range. So if I just play and then you boost it and move it around between 2 and 350, you'll probably notice that.
that's actually a really good frequency, I think, for tuning to your speakers.
Yeah.
That once it started to move up towards more the 500, it was more just about going, do you want the scoop
Yeah. Do you want to sound more metal or not?
Basically that.
Yeah.
Is it? If we're just in the metal zone frequency at that point, aren't we?
But I would say the 2 to 350 in more like rock and barky Marshall tones. That's how I hear it in my head. You don't want to get rid of that as much. But if it's just like, if it's quite a lot to the point where you feel like it's making the guitar sound a bit too kind of, again, cloudy or like muffled or just a bit not clear enough, that's where I would pinpoint it.
Do you know the other thing I'm really feeling in obviously what we're hearing are the Genelec 8040s as opposed to what you're hearing, which is whatever you're listening on. I think what it's showing to me is what an unbelievably good speaker the 8040 is for a flat
Genelec
response guitar. Because I'm sort of feeling like most of the stuff that we're doing to the EQ is making it worse, not better.
Yeah.
It's so good flat through these speakers. But let's have a little, I think it might, interestingly, it's more likely
It'd be very different on that.
Yeah, that your presets on whatever device that you've got will have been dialed in using a decent pair of studio monitors. So it's probably more likely that we're going to want to change EQs on these, isn't it?
Definitely.
Or maybe, like I said, I think if you've got small studio speakers, you're probably getting something useful from this. Let's move up to that 500. Oh no, this is 1,000 hertz then, this one.
So let me make that a peak. So
what does that mean? What did you just do?
I changed the type of sort of, you've got high pass, low pass, high shelf. Like if it was originally on that, which it's going to bring
so everything above it goes.
Yeah, but I'd rather use a peak because then we can be more pinpointy.
Yep.
So now, 500 is your kind of mid-range where, we're talking, we were on about metal, so let me boost some gain. Yeah, so...
Okay, so boost or cut, right? This is where you've probably heard the phrase smiley face EQ, right? It's standard human ears like, but more bass end, less mid-range, more high end. But actually you have to be quite careful if you're trying to record guitar and you want the guitar to be heard whilst other...
If you scoop it too much.
it gets lost, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of fun on its own though, right?
Yeah.
So that was at 500. So what happens if we push the frequency up a bit?
As we start to go higher, I suppose the way I like to think about it is anywhere between 500 and 1,000 is your kind of, it's a personal preference mid-range thing, if that makes sense. When you get 1,000 plus, it's more the honky stuff. So let's move it up to say 1,000.
Just to my ears would be if I was listening to guitar in a track and just going, I want to either just increase the level of the guitar within that track or pull it back a little bit. That's the frequency I think I'd be.
It's the one that makes it jump out more or not.
That's what I think. That's where and it's not necessarily making the guitar sound better or worse in some of the ways the other frequencies are. It's just more prevalent, less prevalent, rather.
I think that's because maybe guitar sits in and around that area in the, like if I'm mixing music and I'm thinking drums, bass, guitar, vocals, like guitar, that is roughly anywhere from 1,000 to sort of 5,000.
Right.
Is where you're gonna have the biggest like tonal influence over the sound of the guitar for the mix.
Yeah. Is all the advice that you're giving here, or in your experience, is it the same whether you're recording a clean guitar or a driven guitar, or do different?
With a higher gain guitar, these moves are way more noticeable. I tend to do way less to a clean guitar.
Right.
The only thing I would do to a clean guitar or something with a little bit of like a edge of breakup or compressed edge of breakup, it will be higher up, like 2 to 3K,
Okay.
because sometimes it can be a bit chimey too much,
Right.
and I'll pull it down a little bit just to soften it.
I wonder if that's when people talk about, particularly on single coil, that sort of transient sound. That is a higher frequency,
ice
and it can
picky
be a
thing.
bit unpleasant, can't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Well, let's see. Let's see what we get. So the next
if
sort
I
of
turn that
preset
off.
point on here was at 3,000 hertz. So let's see what that does.
That's ice picky. You can hear that on the pick attack.
I would go with what you were saying before. I still think this is like the 1,000 hertz one. This is still for me very much about, do I want to elevate my sound in the mix or pull it back? I don't. As soon as even just with like 1 or 2 dB off of the 3,000 hertz, I was sort of starting to sound like someone's done this to the guitar.
Yeah. It's way more influential. So yeah, and then the higher we go, the more, like I say, after about 5, on a higher gain tone, I would say 6K is where you start to get, and above is where you get into the kind of nuisance fizz stuff.
Right. Which some
especially
people
on metal
love,
guitar.
right, and some people hate.
Yeah.
But I do agree. Wasn't there was an interesting observation. I remember someone saying they like to record the guitar with the fizz, but then EQ it out afterwards.
Yeah, because sometimes it can give you that subconscious, or I forget the word, but it can give you a subconscious feeling that you're missing if you take it out while you're trying to play.
Right. So is the general sense that actually have it all in to record it and then take out the bits that you don't like?
Yeah, to your preferences, you know. Like I think for me, generally unless it's, as I mentioned earlier with the whole notch filtering, that was bothering me when I'm playing. So I got rid of it. But this stuff, I would just tend to leave until I've recorded it and listen back.
Just out of interest, I'm sure that this block is called Parametric 8, but it's I see you have got 8. So we just didn't have the 7th and the 8th ones added in, right? So it's like hyper versatile. If that's blowing your mind a bit, or you don't have an 8-band parametric, you can do exactly the same thing, kind of, well, not exactly the same. The same principle applies with the graphic EQ. You've just got to find.
Yeah, we can breeze over it real fast.
Yeah, I mean, if we said there we liked sort of 250 as a bass end or 125 as a. So that's great. So just to recap then, my least favourite way of hearing guitar is through headphones.
Yeah.
So what are you typically, is that all because there's just not enough bass end and there's too much of a certain thing, or is it just the proximity of the speaker to your ear?
I think it's that.
Right.
I'm the same. I don't like using headphones to play guitar to because I feel it's too close. It's not the same as allowing the sound to mix with the air in the room, you know, and get that feeling. So I generally don't like it. The only time I'll make an exception is obviously when you're playing a gig and you have to have in-ears in. But
then you're hearing a bit of everything, aren't you? Right?
Yeah.
I do think there are effects now, or certain things where you might see a control like room or air or something.
Yeah.
And I often think those controls are almost specifically aimed at headphone users to just try and create some sense of space.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you've got really small studio monitors, use that parametric EQ, find out where it is that you're just trying to want to add some extra bass in. Of course, the smaller the speaker you go, the less really low end it'll be able to reproduce, so you won't even hear some of the lower end stuff. And then everything mid-range and high-end is to taste, right? Just find what you like.
I think it's a good point that you raised with the smaller speakers, studio monitors. You're going to find that they're exaggerated in the higher mid-range and higher because they're smaller drivers, and they're going to lack in the low end. So you'll end up doing this. Whereas the bigger you go, the more that evens out. And then
I'm going to throw another curve in here as well, which I noticed the other day in the room that Pete mixes in. The room accentuates
massively,
but all the frequencies as well. Again, on the assumption rather that you're not going to go and spend £1,000 acoustically treating your room. That's where again the parametric EQ is your friend. But that's different for the room. So if you get a sound in your room that sounds great and go, great, off I go to rehearsals now, slap the thing down.
Just hang a bunch of coats up in your bedroom.
I think you've really got to understand how much where you are playing and what you're playing through changes.
Yeah. Just don't go over the top. That's my biggest advice when you're trying to EQ your guitar. If you start boosting like loads of mid-range and then cutting loads of high, like might work for that one instance when you're trying to play, but it's not. It's better to be subtle about it.
Okay, so that's some advice if you've got studio monitors, and we touched a little bit on headphones, but studio monitors mainly. We're going to jump over to now using the Laney, which is a super popular FRFR cab, not the only FRFR cab you can buy, loads of these, but it's a 112. And what you're going to hear now is a combination of a couple of mics close to it and the room mics to capture the high frequency. And then we'll go through how we might want to put some different EQ settings on these sounds for you. Let's have a little listen to this then. So it's the same patch, no EQ yet.
Yep.
Basically exactly what you just heard through in the first passage of playing. We're just hearing it now through a different speaker.
Yeah.
So objectively describe how it's different, and then subjectively describe what you like more or less.
For me, I think it sounds less true to the source.
Yeah.
And that's probably because, although this is a full range speaker, like a PA speaker, it has all the range. And the idea is that you have to use IRs to get it to sound like a guitar cab.
Yeah.
There'll almost certainly be a baked in EQ curve on that speaker cab, especially because it's got a switch for a 1x12 and a 4x12, and probably what they've done is added some low end or taken some low end out, or added some mid range, taken it out. It's not, I'm not saying they've EQ'd it to sound like a guitar cab, because that's what the IR's for, but at the same time, it will be tuned a certain way to complement guitar sounds.
I think that terminology of full range flat response is, I don't know how true that is, but I think studio monitors in a near field environment are much closer to a flat response.
Oh, 100%.
You know, as soon as you take a big speaker in a wooden box, I don't even know how, I mean, first and foremost, this, you know, a PA speaker or a guitar, it's designed to project sound in a way that a near field monitor doesn't. And so I kind of feel like quite often it's just, the whole vibe is just different. If you're sat 3 feet away from a speaker cab versus 3 feet away from a near field monitor, it's just a different vibe, isn't it?
Like, one thing you'll notice with this is it's a 1x12, it's a 12-inch driver, right? Isn't it? Generally speaking, 1x12s don't have tons of low end.
Right.
Do they? Like, you know, they're just not going to have as much as a 412 or even a 212, because it's one driver. Whereas these, they're quite boomy.
Yeah.
Which has been added after the fact.
See, I again, this is,
I think,
objectively, without getting into the technical stuff, I think the studio monitors sounded more like the sound that you were trying to create when you dialed it in than when you put it through. But then this is the whole point of this video. It's like, how do we now compensate for that with the EQ? Yeah,
I would say there's more boom, there's more low end.
I do like, that's what I was going to, subjectively.
Yeah.
I do enjoy the thump that I'm now getting. And I'm sure some of that is the fact that it's on the floor and it's bigger. And I don't think it's hugely louder. I mean, it could go hugely louder, but in this particular scenario, we're running it at a pretty similar volume to how we had the Genelix.
The biggest noticeable difference for me is is tonally everything above that mid to high end.
Yeah,
it sounds very different.
It to me has sounded much more barky and almost unpleasant is the wrong word, but that's where I'd be looking to try and soften that or somehow EQ it down.
Yeah.
So I want to keep the thump, which I do like, but I suppose this is let's see what we can find.
This isn't doing anything currently. I'm going to turn on all the bands, so at least we can mess. So at the minute, you can clearly hear.
Very barky, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is going to sound really random to you guys, because we're doing this in the room for us to think, oh, that sounds better to us, but it might be so different. So I would start up here. It's a very broad strokes. Do a bit of this. That already sounds better to me.
The last thing that you adjusted, which is what a relatively small cut, a 4 dB cut at about 2000 hertz, brought it more into line with what we were hearing with the studio monitors, but we're still getting the thump.
Yeah, because I didn't touch anything down that low. I opened it up a bit more by boosting what we got here. Opened it up is a phrase. It's 1.5K, so it's what we were talking about. It's around that frequency is going to push it forward, if you know what I mean. Yeah. It's not going to drastically influence the tone of the preset, but it's going to, it feels more open, whereas this was something I felt was just a bit harsh.
What this definitely doesn't need, I say that, well, let's find out. I don't think it needs
all the low end.
That, does it?
I mean, the room's shaking.
I hate that, and I often, when
I've
get
rid of a bit.
FRFR cabs, unless we're going into this sort of level of parametric EQ, the bass end is so unnatural compared to, well, you'll hear it in a minute with a normal guitar cabinet. So I definitely don't want more bass end through the laney.
So let's just check it out then. If I take out a little bit and broad strokes it, so this is bypassed. Tighter.
That's probably slightly too much, or maybe slightly too low. I might shift that up a little bit, but broadly speaking,
like 150.
What does that sound?
So without it, I mean, that for me that immediately sounds way better.
Yeah.
But what's hilarious is that obviously, if you're still hearing this through these or whatever, that's going to sound so random to you guys.
Oh, I see. If you applied that EQ to you, but that's the whole essence of this video, which is really to sort of, because
that's crazy.
I just think there will be tens of thousands of people who've bought digital modelers that maybe they just don't have the experience that you've got of using this stuff, and the assumption would be, I bought this thing and I've plugged it in and I've downloaded my favorite Revere patches and I'm just going to hear them. It's like. And you could, there's probably 1,000 different types of speaker out there that you could be using, and a million different kinds of room. So you have to understand to some degree the necessity to EQ.
I think it helps to understand. I think on the level that I'm going into, and this isn't like super pro crazy wizard level, but at the same time, from mixing music, there's stuff like the notch filtering and stuff. That's very much like a geeky thing. Yeah. You don't need to know that, but at the same time, it's good to be comfortable EQing stuff and listening out for certain characters in guitar tone that you want to enhance or take away.
I did want to ask, because I know you're is it FabFilter, the plugin that you use?
It's the best.
Yeah, so Revere was working on an analog simulated output for a Victory product last year, and used FabFilter as an EQ to get the filtered sound that he wanted. So I've never used it. So just explain to me, beyond this 8-band parametric EQ that you would get within the Quad Cortex, what does FabFilter do, and when would you use that?
So FabFilter is a company that make the plugins, whether it's EQ, compressors, limiters, whatever, it's for mixing. And they do one called Pro Q, and now it's on 4, Pro Q version 4. It's a parametric EQ. You can make as many bands as you want. It's very sophisticated, but the secret sauce with that plugin is that you can solo the band. Right. So if I want to hear just what that's doing,
so you can't do that on most modelers.
No, you can solo it and just listen to what it is you're wanting to pull out or add or whatever, which is just really, really handy in the world of
so if you're really trying to to EQ your thing to sort of like the infinite degree,
Yeah.
it's the plugin that you use. But that's a plugin that you would have to use with a like a DAW of some
Yeah,
sort.
Logic or Pro Tools or
Yeah.
Cubase or whatever it is. Like it's not the most expensive plugin, but it's probably the most invaluable plugin I use.
Can I just fiddle with this? Because
Yeah. Just take the whole thing off.
that's a good idea.
So this is without it. Like I can hear just now that we've done this, and just to geek out a bit more. I got rid of something that was just horrible in the speaker that I could hear.
I'm still again. I suppose this is all to taste as well. I'm still finding this probably too mid-rangey for me.
Yeah, well, pull it down.
Let me see if I can.
Number 5 probably.
Well, I was going to just add another one in and just see what happens with.
There you go.
So I'm on 4, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's just. Yeah, I don't know. I think people will know this. I'm sort of inherently struggle with FRFR.
Yeah.
It's
not a natural way to use play guitar.
There's almost like a baked in something about an FRFR cab that I find difficult to the Genelex, to me that sounds like a guitar amp and we're just hearing it through some studio speakers. Mm-hmm. And I can't
that's probably because it's been pre-tuned. Like they all of the FRFR cabs, if you put, because what it is it's a PA speaker, right? So you get the Fender one or you get the Laney one or whatever one, it's going to have its own sort of sound to it that's different, and that's probably why you struggle. If you got a PA speaker and ran this through it,
it'd be the same, I think.
Yeah, well,
I think my issue is, and I did do this when I was a youngster, I had PA speakers for my hi-fi at home.
Nice.
And you just go, because of course you just want the power in it.
Yeah.
But what you absolutely realised is that a PA speaker is designed so that the person standing 50 metres away from it gets a nice clear sound, not the person standing 2 metres away from it.
Yeah.
And I kind of almost feel like, I wonder if that's the issue, because all of my experience of playing FRFR cabs has been in the studio, right? So we're very close to it, and I wonder why that's why I don't know, I've always, perhaps it just needs to be used in its, like let it throw the sound out, stand a bit further away, and then perhaps some of that slightly harsher top end will just get dissipated in the space that you're in.
I think they're a useful tool, but the main reason that I don't use them is because I don't like the sound of them. I use speaker cab. I do the whole effects loop return thing because for me that's the sound of the guitar.
Well, that ultimately, I suppose, is our final part of the journey. So your other option that you've got with your digital modeler is to plug it into a guitar amplifier, and that could be the effects return of a normal guitar amplifier, or maybe you want to go for a more sort of dedicated solution, which would be a little power amp and then into a cab. So that's what we're going to hear for the final one. We'll do the same thing again. We'll start with a flat EQ and see what we end up with. The big difference here is we're going to switch the IR off within the patch, so we no longer need to emulate a guitar speaker because we are using a guitar speaker. All right, let's have a listen to this one. I don't think we have a close-up on the Power Valve 200, but just so you know, we've obviously matched the input gain so that we're driving the little preamp valve in this suitably from the QC. EQ is completely flat, and it's running at about a quarter volume.
mean,
the stupid thing is here, I suppose ultimately all the clever technology that we're running with the Genelecs and with the Laney to emulate a speaker cabinet is obviously ultimately if you just have a speaker cabinet. So immediately, and I'm not saying we won't EQ this, but immediately it's got the thump I want and a really pleasant to listen to sort of mid-range and high-end.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing there going, ee! If anything, I might actually turn I could do it from the presence control on here, but we'll do it from the... I might just dial a bit more top end in, but that's to taste, right? Rather than because I don't like...
Yeah.
I'm not trying to get rid of anything.
I think the first thing we should do, though, is listen to the EQ we applied to the Laney to see how that sounds. So, obviously, without it on. Now you can hear that there's so much of that high mid that we boosted that it's now over the top out of that cab, which sort of backs up what we were saying about how the Laney sounds a little bit sort of boomy and not very clear.
I think as well, that is just every FRFR cab I've used, regardless of the brand, does this PA cab thing, lots of bass end, something lacking in the mid-range, lots of high end. And that's what that EQ curve previously is trying to compensate for. Yeah. But obviously, through the Genelecs, it didn't feel like it needed to. And through the real guitar cab, of course you don't need, it sounds so daft, isn't it? But when you replace the thing that you're trying to digitally emulate with the thing, we shouldn't be surprised that it sounds fine because that's the thing.
I mean, interestingly, for me, when I'm listening through studio monitors, and for those of you that play at home a lot or work a lot in studios, you get used to the sound of a mic'd up cab through studio monitors. So I enjoy that. But it almost as much as hearing a cab in the room, but the difference is the cab in the room, filling the room, shifting the air. That's something as guitar players, you kind of, if you've spent years doing that, you're always going to love that more.
I've got in my home studio, I've got a small pair of Genelecs, the 8020s.
Yeah, those great.
That I run my computer through, and I've got a little mini QC and stuff, and I've just got a 30-watt 1x12 combo in the corner. Yeah. And I totally get if I want, if I'm recording to a DAW or something like that, the convenience of the QC and it's great. But just to just plug in and sit back and play, and just for the sound, for my own personal pleasure, the little 30-watt amp in the corner, and I'm convinced it's physical thing rather than any clever technology inside it. It's just that's what I like. Big, slightly bigger box, but probably about the same size as that. 12-inch speaker, nice reverb, boom. Yeah. But
if it ain't broke.
Well, so what might you do to EQ this up to? I suppose, in fairness, we can just apply a couple of filters and just show where we sweep them across. I certainly wouldn't want to add any more bass end to that. I don't think.
Let's have a listen. I'm hearing something sort of. I'm gonna. Just to smoothen it out.
Oh, you take that away. I quite liked it. But I think as well, depending on how old your ears are, I sometimes wonder whether or not the older I get, the more I'm dialing the top end in, just because my ears are naturally losing the...
This is something I found shrill in the sound, which is why I've taken it out. If I turn it off... And don't forget, it's where I'm sat. It's just, for me, it's got rid of this weird whistly frequency. Yeah.
Oh, okay. What did Tay say just for camera there?
You'll hear it in the mics.
I'd say it is helping through the mic.
Yeah. To take the treble out. Okay, interesting. Because in the room, I think I'm liking.
If you boost it, can't hear that. Shh. It's like I can't even do. It's like
For me, I think my only thing is here, I probably wouldn't rely on the EQ now to get that. I would just turn the treble on the amp up a bit more for me. That's all I'm not trying to isolate some hidden frequency here. I'm sort of just going,
well, it's not
could I
hidden,
just make
it's
it?
right there.
I know what you mean.
So, no, I'm joking. But
yeah.
I get what you're saying. And again, you're right. You don't really need to use that. I'm just doing that because I felt like it was there and I wanted it. To me, that sounds smoother. And then I'd go to that or the amp.
Yeah.
You know, on there to get more of what I want.
It's so.
But we're using what speakers in that?
Gold, maybe.
Alnica Gold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that has its own
a characteristic
sound,
right?
and you use a speaker cab for the sound that it has. Why do we use V30s for metal? Because they sound great with metal. Why do we use? So there's no real point in going in and starting to EQ the hell out of it.
And you know what? Everything we said about studio monitors sounding different depending if they're bigger, smaller, different brands. It's the same with, so you know, a 212 or 412, different speakers, different size cabinets. One of the points Rabir just made a minute ago is your proximity to where you sit. And that's the same with any speaker, whatever, you know, your near field speakers, it's very well documented. It kind of wants you to sit in a certain place to get the certain sound. With guitar cabinets, it's more that, you know, if you stand in front of it versus off to the side of it, you get a different kind of vibe of the top end.
When we've been testing Victory amps and stuff, and we stood all around the room and going, I just think it needs a bit more. They go, just move over there for a second. And then we do, and you go, oh, no, forget everything I just said.
And that's the same with mic placement, right? Wipe it. So there's an art. I don't know what it is. Half of me was like, let's do this really cool video to help people decide how to EQ their things. And then I'm sort of going, actually, you know, a good pair of studio monitors or a real cab needs very little EQ.
Yeah.
Probably a small, like the worse your studio monitors are, then maybe the more you're trying to compensate. And it did sort of feel like the PA cab thing was the one that needed the most EQing.
Yeah, because it's the furthest from the source, if you want to call it that. What I would say is there are two things. Firstly, don't overdo it when you're messing around with EQ. Yeah. But the second thing is, if you want to get into that world a little bit, start experimenting with finding those whistly frequencies within guitar tone. And they're going to be more apparent the more gain is on the sound.
Yeah.
They just are. So it's a fun learning experience to do something like this, like what I've done here, because you can teach yourself a lot about when you're listening to a guitar sound and something's not quite right for you, it's more than likely going to be something like this first rather than, you know, a bigger issue, if that makes sense.
I actually think the fact that you can run multiple EQs on Quad Cortex is a great feature, because actually, if you're trying to decide between two EQ shapes and going, actually, do you know what? And in the time it takes you to dial one to the other, you've kind of forgotten what the first one sounds like.
Yeah.
It's a really handy feature just to be able to go, here's one, here's the other.
But what's funny is that if, let's say, I'm on C and A and I'm like, for this song I'm using this one, and for this song I'm using this one.
Like different EQ for each song.
Yeah, and I move to this and I can go like this. I can go, well no.
Yeah, that's handy, I think. Anyway, look, there you go. I hope you found this useful. Like I say, this is anybody that's trying to use you might have a 40-year-old pod, I don't know, or right through to the latest thing, right through to plugins, everything. Just learn how your parametric EQ works and get into the idea of, you know, in each different environment that you're hearing it, you know, to get the best out of that product, you need to just give it a tweak.
Don't ever underestimate the power of EQ with...
Sounds like something that Obi-Wan Kenobi would have said, or something like that. Or Yoda. Say it different. Estimate the Q of the power. Anyway. I'll just go and I'll get my coat. Thank you very much. Can you play us out, please, with your preferred EQ on that, and just play some juicy guitar tones, because that's secretly the only reason we watch these videos. And I'll just watch the chords that you play, because you're so good.
Oh, let me get some delay back on it.
Okay.
I had to get rid of it, you see, so that we could...